Welcome to EoZTV. I'm Elder.
Mrs. Elder.
It's been a long time since we did our last show, probably nearly 2 years, I think, or a year and a half. So Mrs. Elder thought it might be a good idea for us to reboot things and have her interview me to talk about the blog.
Well, welcome.
So it's the Mrs. Elder show and I'm being interviewed. That's fine.
Okay, no problem.
Okay.
Hey, we got to have some fun here.
Okay.
Hey, let's get it kicked off. Hey, tell me, why did you start this blog?
Oh, man, you're asking me questions that are in the frequently asked questions.
Yeah, but the thing is that, you spent a lot of time doing this and not with me. So I got to find out about it.
That's what's going on over here. Okay. The blog started around the year 2004. What happened was I was in Yahoo message boards. I sort of got addicted to these message boards talking about Israel. And I would get in arguments with things, and I would spend time looking up and researching and coming up with really great answers. But the way the message boards work, they're formatted in such a way that your answers would only show up on the screen for half a day or something like that, and then it would scroll off as people started talking about other things. And I didn't like spending all this time writing what I thought were pretty good essays that very few people would see. So I decided to start a blog. As a matter of fact, it's funny because a number of people from the Yahoo message boards all started blogs at the same time, around the time I did it. And I'm not sure how many of them are still blogging. I think a couple are. But for the most part, I started my own blog, mostly just to, for me to write little things as well as to keep track of interesting news articles, which is what, when I started off, it was mostly me trying to find good news articles and making small comments on them. But as it was, it morphed into other things, into more original things, and my own analysis, and then
but analysis about what?
Analysis about what? About Israel, about Israel's neighbors, about the Arab world, about anti-Semitism, and about whatever else was in my mind.
Well, the question really becomes, why is your blog so special? Tell me what the root is what's making it great.
You're I'm not quite as I don't use those sort of words to describe my blog, but I'm glad that you think so. But I do try to make it unique. I have in my own mind every time that I write an article that I want to make sure that every article is going to teach everybody that reads it something. I don't want to just put stuff out there that you could read elsewhere. If I see that other bloggers or that other newspapers or TV or anything has covered a story well, I'm going to tend not to handle that story because let the other people do it. I want to make sure everything's original or that there's an angle that people haven't looked at before, even if it's a story that people have seen before, but maybe there's I hope that I could find an angle or a way of talking about it or a direction that others didn't really have. So
let me interrupt you for a second.
Go for it.
Okay, listen, I know this sounds kind of crazy and you take it for granted, but the fact is that there's a lot of people who really don't get what's going on. Why don't you describe your view of anti-Semitism and something really fundamental about what drives you? Because it's something that's very, people don't get it. They don't get that they run into things on a daily basis that are very anti-Semitic. Why don't you give a definition of what that means?
Well, the definition of anti-Semitism is very easy. What it actually means in real life is what's difficult. Anti-Semitism, of course, is people who have a hatred of Jews, and that usually would be something that's considered an irrational hatred of Jews, just like any other prejudice. The interesting thing in that where the blog comes in and where a lot of the modern discussions of anti-Semitism comes in is what exactly is the relationship between anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism. I once made, and I don't have it with me in here to show the people at home, but I once made a Venn diagram, almost as a joke, but it's pretty accurate, showing that anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism almost completely overlap. It's theoretically possible to be only anti-Zionist and anti-Semitic, but in reality, it generally isn't. The reason is it's fairly simple. When I'm talking anti-Zionism, I'm not talking people that disagree with the government. Everybody disagrees with the Israeli government. Everybody has problems with it. Everybody in Israel will complain about things that are going on in the government from both the right and the left. So the people that claim to be, merely, critical of Israel, and then they complain that people are trying to shut them up or something like that. No, it's not true. Real anti-Zionists are people that do not want a Jewish state to exist. The reason.
But there's a lot of religious people who don't want it. Can you differentiate a little bit more for me?
Sure. Well, let me first get into the 99%, then we can get into that part.
Okay, fair enough.
The 99% of the people that believe that the state of that the Jewish state, I'm going to say specifically the Jewish state, shouldn't exist, are denying Jews their right to self-determination, the human right of self-determination.
And where do you get this right from self-determination? I just want to go to the fundamentals so that somebody who doesn't have any exposure really gets that foundation to really be able to make a decision when they see something. So please explain.
Well, every people have a right to determine how they should live their lives as a people. So the question comes down to what's the definition of a people? Jews have been defined as a people and as a nation, even if they didn't have a place to literally live for the most part for 2,000 years. But if you look at literature from the 19th, 18th century, and I do this, I'll look at Google Books every once in a while just to look at these sort of things. Judaism isn't just a religion. Judaism is it's a family, it's a people, it's a nation. There's a Jewish nation, there's a Jewish people, and I'll say the word family because many of the laws in the Torah really prioritize our family on top of other people.
Which we'll make a show on another time, but the fact is that let's go ahead and I just want to make sure we get those fundamentals so people really get it.
Right.
Because people don't even know what Torah means.
That's true, but that's
no. I'm just saying too, because if you're laying out a foundation, you got to make sure that you explain everything so that you can go ahead and help them build their foundation. Because if they really understood what they were doing, they wouldn't do it. And I think that if you're able to give over information. I hear you.
They would do it. That's the thing. The whole point of anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism nowadays is that it is irrational. There is nothing that is logical about it.
It's an emotional response, I take it.
It's not just an emotional response. It depends on where it comes from, but it is people need, it seems, to feel superior, to hate, the people that are others. There's very fun. The hate against Jews is similar to the hate against blacks or the hate against gays or anything like that, in the sense that people are scared of things that are different from them. But Jews are unique. The hate against Jews historically has been really unique because only Jews, as far as I can tell, have been hated from all directions. They've been hated for being too rich and hated for being too poor, hated for being too communist and hated for being too capitalist. Hated for being, trying to fit in with the society, and hated for being outside of society.
But wait a minute. Mm-hmm. Why?
Why? If you knew the answer to that, you'd be much more brilliant than I am. People have been looking at this question for literally centuries.
Well, let's even talk about it now. Let's bring it to the table. That's what we're doing.
The reasons why is again, it's hard to know the reasons why. People seem to have a need to feel that the problems in their lives could be blamed on somebody else instead of looking at themselves.
Okay.
And that's one reason. I mean, there's a lot of overlapping reasons, obviously. I mean, again, it's a gigantic topic, but it's happened historically. If you go through the Middle Ages, you'd say, okay, because people were saying that, they would, if they had the Black Death came about, so people blamed the Jews and said they were poisoning the wells. Christians have a history of hating the Jews because for 1900 years they taught that Jews killed Jesus, so that somehow their God was killed by a couple Jews. So therefore all Jews were guilty of this. And Christianity, Christian anti-Semitism is nothing to be sniffed at. It's a huge issue that only got really addressed in 1964, at the Vatican, and that's only Roman Catholics, and again, I don't know all of the different Christian denominations, but certainly the Russian, the Eastern Orthodox Christian or Catholic communities did not accept this either. So all the fundamental old anti-Semitism still exists. As a matter of fact, in Israel, you will very often find that Christian Palestinians have historically been more anti-Semitic than the Muslims, which is an interesting thing. There is Muslim anti-Semitism. It's been around there for a long time.
But let's go back to the fundamentals. Sure. Anti-Semitism means what? And let's keep rebuilding what that means, because the question is that people really don't get when I know I asked it earlier and I'm asking it again. the Christians, I was going to say too, in today's time, all the Christians that I come into contact with don't have a problem. They're excited, even with Trump, good, bad, or indifferent. The fact is that they feel they're being represented. Okay, why is it that that's in the Christianity world? I think that they've come a long way, and they don't have the hatred. And I think that they're feeling the anti-Semitism against them in today's time. So I want to really draw out this anti-Semitism. I want to keep bringing it closer.
There are a lot of different Christian denominations. Some of them are still extremely anti-Semitic. Some of them aren't. The fundamentalists in the United States tend not to be, but there are plenty of Christians, Protestants, and others that have been extraordinarily anti-Israel. I had a series of articles last year looking at American, I think it was mostly Protestant magazines, and from the 1940s and 50s and going on with that. And it was, the hatred of Judaism was astonishing, actually. It was, it astonished me because I hadn't really looked at this stuff, pre-Vatican. And it was almost as if the existence of the Jews was a challenge to Christian theology, according to some of the Christians, some of the Christian groups, because especially when the state of Israel was reborn, because according to Christian theology, the Jews missed the boat. They did not accept Jesus, and therefore they were doomed, to always be second class at best, and fundamentally flawed. And then when they won, the war, and they won the battle, and they had their own state, and they were proud. They were completely after the Holocaust, which many Christians thought of, okay, this is something they really deserved. That it's true. They really believed it. So obviously there were some Christians that were very, very upset over it, and they tried to help. But from a theological point of view, a lot of Christians really felt like, oh, this is finally what we've been expecting all this time. And then when it turned around, and then Israel ended up having a state, and Jews were proud, it was a fundamental rebuttal to a lot of what they believed. And again, I'm pretty sure I'm talking Protestants over here. Things are the fundamentalists, and again, I'm certainly no expert on this, so I'm a little bit uncomfortable saying this as definitive. But my understanding is the fundamentalist, like born again Christians that became prominent in America in the 1980s, 1990s, and are very pro-Israel.
Mm-hmm.
They are, they tend to be more on the right wing politically. But that's still a relatively new phenomenon. And I can tell you also that the anti-Israel forces are trying to make inroads into those groups as well. So it's a fluid situation. It's not something that's cut and dried. There are many Christians that are extremely philo-Semitic and pro-Israel. There are many Christians that are not, that are quite opposite, especially in Europe, in Eastern Catholic, Eastern Christian sects. Certainly the ones that are in Israel are extraordinarily, again, truly anti-Semitic, besides being anti-Israel.
Well, I think that it really comes down to that we're in a time today. We're in 2018 going into 2019. And the bottom line is that there's a lot of people who don't get any religious foundation whatsoever anymore, at least in America. And it's extracted. And so the question really becomes, and my goal of doing this interview with you is to have you identify as best as you can to give over the information to define what that means so that people in today's time can actually understand what they know, what they don't know, and actually hopefully spur the growth to actually go look at the facts instead of the emotions.
Your every single question you're asking is like a 2-hour answer.
I'm not disagreeing with you. I didn't say we're not going to do multiple series.
Right.
What I'm saying to you is that I'm trying to put out something. You have a blog, and it's great. And like you said, you actually hit on things that other people don't hit on. You catch different angles. You go and you're as honest as you can, and you try to highlight as best you can all of the different issues. So what I'm trying to do right now is I'm trying to get the fundamentals for, number one, why did you start it? Number two, why it's so important? Number three, what is the foundation that people can really hold on to and understand in really simple words? Why is it that this blog is so important?
Again, I'm not going to put it in terms of the blog. I'm going to put it in terms of Israel, because that's
Which is
obviously
fair.
the point.
No, that's fair.
The point is, why is Israel so important, and why people should support Israel.
Okay.
And those are the things I do try to bring out in the blog. So there's really two angles to look at it, or I'm sure there's lots of them, but from based on the question you asked just now, there's you can look at it from a religious point of view, even from a Christian religious point of view.
Okay.
And you can look at it as this is something, again, under the fundamentalist Christians, and this part does make some Jews uneasy, especially liberal Jews, because they're afraid that, the fundamentalist Christians are only pretending to be pro-Israel because they eventually want to see Israel, the current state of Israel, be the precursor to the second coming, and that eventually they're going to turn against the Jews when something like this doesn't happen. So there are Jews that are, and then just not only liberal Christian, not only liberal Jews, because it is something that that Jews have been very sensitive to over the centuries, of the worry of these religious Christians coming over and trying to convert them. If you look at, and again, I like looking at history. If you look at what I would call proto-Zionism, there were a number of initiatives in the 18th and 19th centuries, very much in England as well as in America, but it seemed to be centered in England, but it could be other places in Europe. I just don't, I would tend to read only the English stuff on Google Books. But a lot of these societies would come up in England saying, the Society for the Conversion and, for the Restoration and Conversion of the Jews, meaning specifically, we want all the Jews to go to Israel, back to Israel, and then we're going to convert them all. And that's clearly and they were very explicit about what their goals were. It says, we're going to get them all there, and then the scene will be ripe for the second coming of Jesus. But we want to convert them. And that's why...
Is that why there's so much support for Israel?
Well, now it's different. It's changed a little bit. You see, at the time, certainly in the 19th century, early 20th century, there were a lot of missions that, in fact, it's funny because the way the State Department is nowadays pretty much came from these missionaries, that American missionaries, as well as, and again, I'm not talking about the British as well, but there were a lot of missionaries, German, that went to Israel, and that they were trying to convert the Jews as well as the Muslims. They would want to convert them. They would go to Africa. They'd go everywhere to try to convert people to Christianity. They didn't have much luck with the Jews. They didn't have very much luck among the Muslims, from what I could tell, either. They had a little bit, but not much. But that was what they also. Everybody wanted to be in Israel. It was like a gold rush almost. There were a lot of people that traveled there, and a lot of people that wrote diaries of their trips over there. But their intent was, or a lot of them had the intent of converting the Jews, as far as to set the scene for the second coming. The nowadays, after the Holocaust, and after it was made very clear that Jews are extremely skittish at this 2,000-year history of Christian persecution of Jews, to the Jewish minds, the Spanish Inquisition is not that long ago. People in America look at it was 1492. Yeah. People in America look back at 1776. 230. That's so many years ago, and to Jews, 1700s. That's not so long ago. That's when the Vilna Gaon was around. He's an Acharon. He's one of the later guys. So Jews tend to take the long view of things. And so the Spanish Inquisition was like a big thing that people still are like, okay, this is a major event that still reverberates even today, and it's not
and
a
rightfully
joke.
So.
And Spain itself has said, they formally apologized. It wasn't that long ago for it, and started inviting, saying, hey, any Jews that left, we invite you to come back and become citizens. And some Israelis did, not necessarily move there, but they took advantage of they say, hey, well, it doesn't hurt, in these uncertain times to have a second passport.
No, understood. And so the thing is that, again, let's drop back into why Israel is so important.
Okay, so I was just saying, so certainly from a religious point of view, from a Christian religious point of view, the idea, just the idea that the Jews did come back and they built this wonderful state, really from scratch and really using their own hard work, it resonates with them. Just certainly with Americans, when the Pilgrims and when the original founding fathers, and their ancestors came to the United States, they were looking at the United States as a new Israel, essentially. To them, they thought of themselves as new Israelites, and they were coming to a new country. And you'll see a lot of biblical names in, Bethlehem or whatever like that. There's plenty of names of cities in America that are named after, after cities in Israel, because this was such a fundamental part of them. They were building a new world, but they were trying to model it on this ideal world that they see in the Bible. And here, Israel was doing it in the actual place. Jews, real Jews, were doing it in the real place. So, and also the America has the ideal of, do the work yourself. It's a meritocracy. If you're good at something, you can reach the top.
I'm going to hit you on something really fundamental.
Let me finish.
Okay, go ahead.
So it's like, so the American way of looking at things is that, if you do your hard work, you can get rewarded for it. It's not like based on your family. It's not based on, whether you're a duke or something like that. And that's exactly what Israel did. These people who had nothing only a few years ago came and they built this brilliant country. And that's something that really, really resonates with Americans more than it resonates with Europeans, because Europeans did have more of a class structure to it. And they did have different people on, that were, the haves and the have-nots. But they didn't have the exact way that Americans thinking of, hard work is going to get you somewhere. Israel did it. And it's something that Americans, just from the American viewpoint, certainly admire. So the religious people in Europe probably didn't look at it the exact same way that the American religious people looked at it, because everybody's a product of their environment, and the American way of life is a different way than the old world. Just to try to finish the other side of what you were asking before, it isn't only the religious, and it isn't only the that mindset that attracts people to Israel, or that should attract people to Israel, because, and this is the irony of all ironies, is that the people that are now the most antipathetic to Israel are generally come from the left side of the political spectrum. They're generally liberals, or far liberals, what we call progressives. These are people that say that they have liberal values, that they care about things that are full equality and that sort of thing. And the amazing part is Israel is a liberal country. Israel is reason there's reason that liberals should want to support Israel. There are reasons that conservatives should want to support Israel. In the old days, in America, liberals were all for Israel. There wasn't even a question.
But is liberals the same as what you're thinking today as it was back then? I think the spectrum's moved a little bit, don't you think?
It has. No, it hasn't. I'm not going to get quite that. That's also another question over here. There is a danger in America that the liberals are moving much more towards the left, much more towards progressive, which is much more towards socialism, the Bernie Sanders type stuff, that sort of thing. This is a problem, but the question is that real liberalism? I would start to argue they're not actually liberals. Liberals are people that would be looking at pure equality for everybody. You're being colorblind. People are, based on, that you don't discriminate against anybody depending on anything. Israel doesn't discriminate against anybody. Arabs are full citizens of Israel. Christians are full citizens of Israel. Israel does more, for the handicapped, because, again, realistically, because of all the wars, there are a lot of handicapped people in Israel, a lot of people who are, who are missing arms and legs or eyes. And Israel does a great job to rehabilitate them and to make sure they feel equal with everything else. Israel has, autistic people or could be brought into the army. Women, obviously, Israel's had a female prime minister, way before, and America still hasn't had a female president. Israel has had, women who are in the army, but even though women were in the army from the very beginning, they were not in combat roles, and now they are, if they want to be. So there's, so Israel really has walked the walk of as far as true equality and true liberal values, much more than, at least as much as many European democracies, more than America in many respects. Even how it treats Muslims. Europe does not, in Switzerland, Muslims aren't allowed to build minarets. And in some, even in some Arab countries, they put limits on how loud the Muslim call for prayer can be. In France, Muslim women aren't allowed to wear, what they call the burkini, the full coverage. In Israel, we were in Israel. We were watching the, Muslim girls who were going into the water in their full, the full clothes. Nobody cared. Nobody even looked at them twice. It was no big deal. In the same beaches that the Jews were. And everybody tries to make it sound like Israel is like, this terrible, terrible state that, discriminates against it. And Israel is more tolerant of Muslims than most European nations, and probably more than America is. It's so Israel, so if you're conservative or if you're religious, Israel has value to you for, I'm talking about Christians, for obvious reasons, because it is like, it's something that the things that you grew up with is actually coming true. These the prophecies that are in the Old Testament, that children are going to be playing again in Jerusalem and that sort of thing. That's all come true in the last 60 years, 50 years. It's amazing to think that that's all happened. But from the liberal point of view as well, here you have in the middle of what is a clearly illiberal Arab world, clearly very conservative, very masculine, very oriented against the idea of what you do, and that of what again in the West it's called a guilt society in which you're responsible for your own actions, and in the Arab world it tends to be more called a shame society, meaning the appearances are more important than the actual work. But Israel has the Western point of view, has a Western way of looking at it. So the Western world, whether you're right or left, you should support Israel if you really care about Western values. And even if it doesn't matter whether your Western values are liberal values or conservative values or religious values, all of them Israel happens to fulfill better than practically any country on earth that you can think of. And again, the better is a very fundamental point of view too, and I'm probably going to finish it because I think we're going way too long, but the better is a very important point to make, because the people that do criticize Israel, they don't criticize Israel based on how it compares with other countries. They're going to say, oh, here's something Israel does not do that is not perfect. They are judging Israel against the standard of perfection that nobody is measured against. Now, again, very often they're lying. Very often Israel does much better on these things than they say they are. But part of this, what I would consider anti-Semitism, is saying that Jews must be held to impossible standards. And then when they fall short, they say, oh, therefore there's a reason for us to hate the Jews. When nobody else on the planet is expected to reach those standards, even close to those standards. So if you're going to criticize Israel, honestly, say, oh, Israel doesn't do what this other nation does, keeping in mind that Israel is always in a constant state of war. Israel's surrounded by enemies. Israel has a constant threat of terror. Now compare any other country that has that same sort of situation and how they deal with the members of their population that are of the same group as the terrorists.
Well, let's do this.
Okay.
Because I know this is going a little bit long. Go ahead and redefine what anti-Semitism is. No, in as truncated as possible so that somebody actually gets it, okay? And people need to hear your view, because what I was going to say, the articles that you put out every single day, people who follow all the time get it. But what we want to do is we want to get the word out. And so I'm just trying to bring it home to where somebody who doesn't get it, that maybe just that one person who's listening can actually come over and say, wait a minute, I get it. Give it a shot.
Okay, my shot, I'll say, is that anti-Semitism is the irrational hatred of Jews for whatever reason.
Okay.
Anti-Zionism is the irrational hate of the Jewish state for whatever reason. And because they'll use whatever reasons they can. They're extraordinarily connected, if not completely identical, very, very close to being identical. And the sort of arguments that are used against the Jewish state very much mirror the sort of arguments that have been used against the Jewish people of the past. And they're, again, both equally irrational, both are true hate groups. The people that hate Israel and the people that hate Jews are the same sort of people. They're haters, they are bigots, they are racists. These are not the sort of people you want to be hanging out with. And so there's a really fundamental connection between the two. But to me, it's the irrationality. Don't try to come up with a reason for it, because there is no reason for it. And when you come up with the reason, then you end up coming up with an excuse for it. There's no, it is irrational. There is nothing to it.
Okay, so my goal is that through the series that we're going to do, I'd like to be able to bring out what are the facts, and we'll be able to try to tie in their emotions, because the fact is that it seems like it's an emotional decision to go ahead and have that hatred. Through future series, we'll go ahead and try to address it, but the fact still remains the same, is that there's a lot of anti-Semitism, there's a lot of hatred, and the fact is that like I said, the goal of what this interview is to try to bring out the fundamentals so people can actually get it, and they can actually look at themselves and realize, hey, I'm part of that hate group and I need to change myself. That's my goal.
Good luck. People don't usually look at themselves and say, "Oh, I'm doing something wrong." It takes it's a special type of person to do that.
Well, I guess I'm going to do it because I got to tell you something. It's time for a change, and I think that we need to do it.
Okay, very good. And until next time, then, I'm Elder.
And I'm Mrs. Elder. And don't forget, go to the blog and donate. We can always use your help at any time. And we got to get this word out. Thanks for listening.
Mrs. Elder's our marketing manager. So, okay, thank you very much. And we'll talk to you next time. Take care.